awareness to end gender-based violence in the form of murder and assault against women suspected of practicing witchcraft. Let's take then this discussion further then. We're joined by Solly Nduku, the traditional health practitioners sector leader. Thank you so very much, sir, for being with us here on SABC News.
Very good afternoon. Very good afternoon to you and your viewers.
You know, one would think that this is something that used to happen in the past. You'd often hear of old women, say in the village, that are accused of being involved in witchcraft. What pushes this narrative? Why do we still have these sort of problems? And is it a case of, you know, it's just a rumor that just goes, you know, out of control? Where does this all start, really?
Certainly, it is a matter that is of grave concern to us as a sector of traditional and it is disturbing because it does focus and target the vulnerable women, and especially in the rural areas. Yeah. So it cannot be disassociated with the gender-based violence which seem to be dominant in our communities. But furthermore, what actually disturbs us most is that this phenomenon has been there in the past years. It actually took predominance in provinces like the Limpopo, which was then the northern province by that time, and also the parts of the Eastern province in the areas of Mbizana and the areas of Matatian. And you'd realize that whoever are the instigators of this tendency, they tend to utilize the young people to actually pursue their own brutal acts of actually violation. But the reality is that it's not something that can be, in the honest fact, be associated with the practice of witchcraft. But it is a perception that is deliberately created to create a divide amongst our communities, especially in rural areas.
Yeah. Mr. Nduku, all right, let me just ask a plain, simple question then. You know, some people believe in it, some people don't, but does witchcraft exist? And are there people that do, in fact, practice witchcraft? And does it really work? I mean, there've even been dramas and shows that show that, you know, that there is such a thing. And just coming from you, does it then exist? I mean, many people don't believe in it, but there's a large number of people who actually do.
A good question, because you must remember that the term witchcraft, it is not of African invention, because the whole myth of witchcraft and sorcerers and all that is not something that has ever been practiced in Africa. Yeah. But what we know it exists in Africa, we believe it is being practiced are the acts of Ubuloi. Yes. And those acts of Ubuloi, they've got their own way of being defined in the African context. And it is believed that those cannot trigger any form of violence, because if then their acts of Ubuloi is something that one need to consult the practitioners, the traditional health practitioners who are well acquainted and actually equipped with the skills of dispelling such evil spirits if they exist. Yeah. But if you talk of witchcraft and sorcerers, certainly that is something that is not of African. It does not originate from Africa. And I always say it's a problem, even that we have tended to actually to submit and actually believe that there is a practice of witchcraft. And I say again, in Africa, we have the acts of Ubuloi or Ukutagata, but that are totally different from what is believed as witchcraft. And Ubuloi, it goes along. Actually, when you are a bad wisher, you've got bad heart. If you perpetuate violence, if you encourage people to kill other people, those are the acts that I would believe our African definition. Those are the acts of Ubuloi, because it is associated with evil and brutality that you actually, the person would want to actually pursue against one another.
Yeah, and according to you, what then needs to be done, or what needs to happen to bring an end to this? And before you say education, I mean, I must say to you, Nduku, that I know a lot of educated people who seem to believe in Buloi, witchcraft, or whatever you call it.
One of the biggest challenges that we have in our country is the lack of sustainability and also our failure to use African solutions to African challenges, because we cannot actually be Eurocentric in approach and seek to apply the Eurocentric approaches in problems. So part of it, of course, is education and awareness, but also it's important to learn better from the past. If you recall, our village viewers can recall, in the early years, there was this kind of violence that happened in the northern province, in Limpopo. And then the Ralushai Commission was established to dig down and establish the real facts around this. And the reality that came out of that actually research by the commission, it was clear that most people were actually victims. It was not traditional, it was not just ordinary people. It was traditional health practitioners themselves because of jealousy amongst themselves. And the women were dominantly victims. So which therefore, there was supposed to be a program in terms of implementing the recommendations that were brought about by the Ralushai Commission. Part of those, it was the legislative reforms that were supposed to be undertaken. Unfortunately, the government aborted that process implementation of those recommendations, which were actually for process that was facilitated by the Gender Commission. One is we need to go back and actually retrieve those recommendations and make sure that they are implemented. Two, we need to ensure that there is a more sustainable partnership between traditional health practitioners, the traditional communities, and government, and the other role players, so that we can make sure that there is education and advocacy, so that our people are made to be aware and protect the most vulnerable, the frail, the elderly, and women who are suffering most, and children who become victims at the end of this whole thing.
And you know, before we get to the issue of the implementation of the legislative reforms that you speak of, there's the issue of protection of women, because a lot of the time these women already know that they are being targeted, or the community knows that they're being targeted. So from the side of the police, for example, I mean, do these women not have anywhere to go or some sort of protection when word gets out that you're actually being targeted at this time, or are the law enforcement authorities part of the problem? And I mean, in terms of getting, you know, before we talk about the legislative reforms.
Yes, but one of the things that I think, without necessarily defending police, it's impossible that we can have a police officer looking after each and every household. Therefore, what becomes important is the protection and also this transformation of the mindset. It must be instilled among the community themselves. So hence I'm saying that a more sustainable and vibrant partnership becomes important, where there is a partnership that is built between the law enforcers, the communities. But it's important, when you talk of communities, we should not be general. We should have focus to say who are believing in this theory of witchcraft. Then we know exactly, we will know the exact audience that must be brought on board in terms of creating this partnership. Because most of the time is that we bring people who are not necessarily even believing and understanding what is the myth that is being manipulated around witchcraft, and say they are the ones who should be the advocates for this actually transformation agenda. For us, it's important to transform the society. And in transforming the society, government must play a leading role in building capacity of those stakeholders who are playing a meaningful role. And if you talk traditional practitioners, the communities of faith and communities of culture, they play an important role in the psychosocial support and being the power molders and part of being the leadership of the society, who can play a role of being a invest in protection of vulnerable elderly women and children who find themselves being the victims of these perpetrators. But again, I don't think we would also dispel that the intrusion of the various forms of faith and religions that seek to demonize all what is African also take advantage to make sure that they demonize the African belief system. And it's important that we stand up and actually work together in protection of our noble belief system, so that our belief system, it is not utilized and be misconstrued as the instigator of brutality and murder to the most vulnerable.
All right.
No way that we can allow that to happen.
Mr. Nduku, thanks for giving us your time and weighing in on the issue. Much appreciated, sir.
Thank you very much. You're most welcome. But the key again is say partnership, advocacy, education. It's important in our society. Right. Let's preserve our culture. Let's preserve belief system, and don't allow it to be demonized and to be made hidden as it is happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's Solly Nduku, the traditional health practitioner sector leader.